to Chiro Hustle. Sit back and learn from the greatest influencers in the profession. This week's episode is brought to you by Imaging Services, ChiroThin, Chiro Moguls, Mahalo Wellness, Local Gold, Chiro Health USA, The Goodman Factor, Chiropractic Rocks, Winner's Edge, Accident Records, Chiro Tax Pro, and Digital Hustle. Let's hustle.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 190 of the Chiro Hustle podcast. I'm your co-host, Luke Millette, and here's your host, Jim Chester.
So today we had the opportunity of interviewing Dr. Thaddeus Gala, and if you want to know how to prepare yourself not to be killed easy, stay tuned. All right, guys, this is episode 190. We're ticking our way towards 200. Tick was intended. And this is a chiropractic podcast. This is Chiro Hustle, and we have Thaddeus Gala with us today, coming in from what part of the world?
Medford, Oregon.
Awesome. And we are coming in from Grand Junction. And what we do with Chiro Hustle is we keep free speech alive and well in this beautiful profession of chiropractic. And we just absolutely love the opportunity to share chiropractic stories. We always believe the person that's the most valuable in the room is the one with the best story. And that's something that distinguishes our guests to the public out there. So welcome to our show, Thaddeus.
It's great to be here, man. Looking forward to it. This is exciting. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. And, you know, based on, I read your bio, I was just really like, holy smokes, this guy is Ironman. You've like, I don't even want to divulge everything yet, but you've done some really impressive stuff. Chiropractor of 14 years. But without me sharing your story, would you mind jumping in and sharing with our audience your story and what like really influenced you to become a chiropractor?
Yeah. My story started when I was 10 years old, and I was remodeling the kitchen with my dad to get ready for my mom's wheelchair. All the doctors said the same thing, said she'd be spending the rest of her life in a wheelchair. She went to expert after expert. They all said, we don't know what's wrong, but whatever you have, it's progressive. Better get your affairs in order. And since then, I've dedicated, well, at least the first half of my career to helping people naturally reverse chronic disease without drugs and surgery, and hence went the route of chiropractic. Fast forward, now we own four integrative clinics. Last year, I think we oversaw around 48,000 patient interactions. We help people with everything from reversing Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, cancer, diabetes, heart disease, your traditional neck pain, back pain, headaches, migraines, all that kind of stuff. My mom's in her early 70s now, and she just started running, and now she wins 5K races in her age group. She's on 0 medications, and she has to find younger and younger friends to keep up with her. So the first success was trying to save my mom's life. That's how I got into chiropractic, plus some sports injuries throughout the years that helped solidify it for me. But that's how we got to where we are, and that's how we're helping tens of thousands of patients a year now.
What an inspiration. I mean, just being able to help your mother must mean a lot to you, right?
Oh yeah. It was a selfish yet selfless quest.
So at 10 years old, did you know you were going to be a doctor?
No, I thought maybe I'd be a homicide detective or a teacher because we grew up out in the middle of the woods. My parents moved up from California to rural Oregon, got a piece of property out in the middle of the woods, pitched a tent. Seriously, this was in the 70s. They pitched a tent, no running water, no electricity, no phones, no roads, nothing. Bought a chainsaw, started cutting down logs, building a house in the 70s, and working on the ranch. So they homesteaded a piece of property. And when we would have animals that either get eaten or they'd get out, I'd always go down and try to find clues. Like, okay, what animal was this? A bobcat? Was this an owl? Was this an owl? Was it a raccoon? What is it that got into the chickens or the rabbits? So I'd try to be detective with that. And then as I got older, I thought I'd maybe be a high school health and maybe PE or teacher and a sports coach. And then I remember sitting in. I always wanted to do something health related. And then the kind of the next prompt in the universe was I was in anatomy and physiology in my undergrad, and the doctor said, well, and with carpal tunnel, this is what chiropractors do. And the light bulb went off, and it was like, I think that's the route to go here. So that's the route that I went, and had some great instructors along the way. Dr. David Seaman, Dr. Lauren Cordain, Dr. Dan Murphy, a whole host of a lot of other professors that were very instrumental that helped me garner the information that then I went to my mom. We started making changes with her and made her transformation, and now the result of many, many others.
That's so cool. And in your bio it says inflammation doctor. What are you really doing to become that detective to decode people's inflammation and to be able to help them with their health and make a positive impact on their journey going forward?
Well, it's the crux of everything you look at. I mean, even with COVID, if the crux of it is overactive inflammation. Even I was listening to a podcast of, I forget who the doctor was. I was running when I was listening to it, so I'm not able to take notes or remember all the specific details. But there was a professor of, I believe, immunology in New York, and he had clinical access, and he was talking about a large portion of people with COVID. What they're finding is there's an overactive inflammatory response, and that's leading to the infiltration in the lungs and the other issues that lead to death. And he was talking about the inflammation link. So the same subclinical low-grade chronic inflammation that leads to things like diabetes, heart disease, and cancer is the same inflammation that leads to arguably the death from COVID. So if you get people's inflammation down, you can pretty much the vast majority of Western diseases go away. It kind of sounds oversimplistic, but it really can be that simplistic.
So after looking at your bio, I can see there's a lot of things that make you unique in the chiropractic world and, other professions as well. Do you want to just maybe touch on what makes you so unique from maybe your typical chiropractor down the street?
So you asked me to kind of toot my own horn, huh?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, good question. It's hard to be self-reflective. I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges is introspection on a deep level. I think if I had to guess, so this is an amalgamation of what I've been told and my own personal development over the years. I would probably surmise that it's the ability to two things. I think the ability to see where to go with something, and I can just kind of like see where to go, and for some reason I'm able to kind of figure out like how to navigate it from the beginning, and I can trust that I can feel my way through it. And then I think right on the heels of that is the ability to actually act upon that. So I think one of the things, like you said before we started recording, you said, "Oh, you're an Ironman," and I did an Ironman when I was in chiropractic school. So, and I had someone say, Thaddeus, think about this. So think of how much time it takes just to even study and be in chiropractic school, but then you were training for an Ironman on top of that. And I think I ended up coming in like the top 20 or 30% my first race ever. I was up there pretty good, and I think I probably could have even done better, but that's not for this conversation. But I think the thing being is, like, before I even signed up for an Ironman, I had never swam a lap in a pool in my life, so I didn't even know how to swim. And that's the very first thing you do is you have to swim, a couple miles. So, here I am thinking, I've never swam a lap in my life, but I know I'll figure it out, and I know enough to figure out how to figure it out. And I trust in that, and I'm willing to take that jump and figure it out on my way down, knowing that I'll likely land on my feet. I don't always land on my feet, but I think I have enough trust in my cat-like instincts that I can make that a reality. And so I'm not afraid to take what I believe to be very calculated risks to try to do something bigger and better.
Well, you also seem to have a high understanding of financial aspect and taxes. Is that true too?
Yeah, I would say it's as a result of the first one, and that is my first career was in chiropractic, and most people probably have this story, right? I mean, we were at the time we were building what I believe to be the Taj Mahal of clinics from the ground up. We had just had a brand new. It was I think we had $800,000 in loans on building this clinic, just on the building, about $800,000 in loans. And this was around 2009, 2010. So this was at the height of the recession. And many of my colleagues were going out of business. And here we are building this brand new clinic. And at the time, we weren't even making enough money as my current job as an associate to cover what the mortgage was going to be. So at the time, I wasn't even making enough money of what the future bills were going to be. I just trusted that we were going to figure it out, and we did. And we worked really long hours, and we worked hard, and it took us a couple of years. But then once we were up off to the races and we were actually making money, I remember sitting down with my CPA and saying, okay, so hold on a second. You're saying that I owe $250,000 in taxes, but I only have around $30,000 or $40,000 in my bank account. How is this going to work out? And he kind of chuckled and said, yeah, if I had a nickel every time I heard that. And I said, well, what do you mean? This isn't funny. I said, I owe $250,000 in taxes, and I don't even have $30,000 or $40,000 in the bank account. And so I realized that I needed to find a way to fix that. So I already had, in my mind, my estimation kind of saved my mom's life in her words, and a lot of other people. So we already got rid of the death part to a certain extent. Now it was taxes, right? So the old saying, death and taxes. So my second career now has been pursuing how to reduce or eliminate taxes. And for the last, 4, 5, 6 years now, I've been able to not pay taxes because of using proper tax strategy and being smart about it while maintaining liquidity, meaning I haven't had to overfund an IRA, haven't had to, sink money into an opportunity zone or all these other things, that strategies that people do. It's how do you keep your money liquid while reducing and eliminating your tax burden? So I believe we've arguably cracked the code on that. And now we've helped, quite a few people with now my second career is helping people with the second part of death and taxes, and that's eliminating and reducing taxes. Typically, we can get people down to around 1.75%. That's the thing I'm excited about, because if I can keep more money in entrepreneurs and chiropractors' pockets, then they can turn around and invest that in their business, into jobs, and other things that are going to make the world a better place when it's in the hands of, I believe, business owners and entrepreneurs, as opposed to politicians that are serving special interests.
So I guess the next part of the conversation, we should have dinner and talk about religion and politics. And
sounds good. We can throw abortion in there while we're at it, and guns.
We'll just go down all the amendments. And,
sounds good.
But it seems like you have a high level aptitude of service and helping people. And one of the things that we like to touch on is you being a chiropractor is what the world would look like if more people were getting chiropractic care. And what if, just if we doubled the level of care that people are receiving right now? I know that I've heard high ends of maybe 8%, and I've heard low ends of maybe 4% of the US population is actually getting chiropractic services annually. What would happen if we just maybe doubled that?
Well, we wouldn't be in the mess we're in now with COVID, that's for sure. I mean, I've yet to hear a politician come out, and maybe there are, so I'll give them that benefit. I've yet to hear a politician come out and say with fervence or with repetitiveness, saying, hey guys, diet and exercise, you need to be healthy. I mean, even the basics, fundamentals, I haven't heard or seen a politician come out and say or do that. And to me, that just speaks to the complete misdirection of where our focus should be. Everyone's talking about a vaccine, or not everyone, but so much of the mainstream is, well, we're working on a vaccine, as opposed to, well, wait a minute. We know that this is affecting older people, predominantly men, with comorbidities. And we've known that since the beginning, and the research really just continues to support that. Yeah, there's these anecdotal, and there's these handful of cases that involve kids, or these few off ones, but the vast majority of the research shows older male with comorbidities. Well, we already know that men live shorter anyways, so arguably you can make the statement saying that they're more prone to die, and they're, a 70-year-old male is arguably more feeble than a 70-year-old female, just based on life expectancy. So if we averaged out maybe, and we took out the variable of age, men and women, it could be about the same. But we know it predominantly affects males' comorbidities that are older. So why aren't we talking about the things that we can prevent? Well, we can't prevent the age, but we can prevent the comorbidities. So why don't we get people healthy and losing weight? I mean, it's no secret that if you eat better and you exercise and do a handful of other things that are healthy, you'll lose weight, you can reverse some of the most chronic diseases, and you'll drastically reduce, if not eliminate, the risk of COVID. I mean, it's sad and borderline appalling how obvious the answer is that personal accountability and personal freedom is both the answer and the solution, and is also shirking that responsibility is the cause. And the fact that we aren't collectively rallying around that as a country speaks volumes to the taking the full pill, if you will, of the mainstream narrative of mainstream medicine, of wear a mask and get a vaccine. Like, seriously? Like that's the solution. Wear a mask and get a vaccine, and that's the solution. Like I don't understand how that makes sense as the first line of defense on any level, as opposed to get your body as healthy as you can, as quickly as you can. I mean, I don't understand that. Right. So if chiropractic was there, it would, I mean, here's the thing, chiropractic, I believe, should be, and quite capably can be, the first line of primary portal of entry as the first line of defense. I mean, I think people should be going to a chiropractor or a naturopath or something, or a profession that can't prescribe medications, or that chooses not to prescribe medications. That should be the very first portal of entry. And then, and if, and only if they can't fix whatever issue someone's dealing with, then they go to a more traditional primary care. Because if we can't fix it, then it probably is something that maybe needs to be a surgical intervention, and then obviously getting more advanced from there with pharmacology or surgery. So I think the primary portal of entry should be a chiropractor or something along those lines. And if they can't fix or ameliorate it, then it needs to go up the level. But, it's so backwards right now.
And that kind of touches on our next question a little bit. What are some mantras that you live your life by?
Personal accountability and freedom is first and foremost. The individual is above the collective every time. Group identity politics and group rights and group privileges and group special treatments, whatever the case may be, undermines the very core principle of individualism and freedom and sovereignty of the individual. And what it does is it causes a possibility for people to shift responsibility and blame to a faceless, nameless organization, whatever the flavor of the month may be, as opposed to taking a look in the mirror and starting by cleaning up their own mess in their own life. So I think my first mantra is it perfect? No, of course not. But my first mantra is personal liberty and sovereignty first and foremost. I don't think the government or other entities should be mandating how you live your life. I think the government's role, and I'll just, because we're on this topic of COVID, or I'm on the topic of COVID anyways, I think their role should be, if anything, during this, it should be to educate and it should be to inspire, but never to mandate. People are smart enough that they will figure out on their own. And it's like the sign that you see at the national parks. It says, "Don't feed the squirrels, because if you feed them, they may become dependent on food and they won't be able to store or forage enough, and they won't be able to survive on their own when the weather changes or things get hard." And we're doing the same thing. So what happens is you have people and politicians getting up there and they're saying, wear masks, we're going to dump money into the economy, all these things. And then people don't have to take personal responsibility for it. They don't have to really get up and exercise. I mean, here's the thing. No one can do your push-ups for you. So instead of trying to tell people you don't have to do push-ups, we're going to give you a vaccine. Instead of doing push-ups, we're going to give you a vaccine. Why don't we inspire people to actually do the push-ups? That's what government is there for, I believe, is to make people honor agreements if agreements aren't being followed between consenting individuals. And if anything else, they should be educating and inspiring, but not mandating or forcing people to behave a certain way, unless they're infringing on someone else's rights. And someone could make the argument and say, well, COVID and health, you're infringing on someone else's rights. And I think that's where the conversation actually should be taking place, is why and if the government should even be intervening in something like this, which I don't believe they should. But that's where the conversation, I think, should be taking place, if it is going to be taking place at all.
Well, all I know is the elections are coming up, and I hope you don't mind if I just write your name in.
Sure, that's fine. Or you can go. What is it? Joe Jorgensen, I think, is the Libertarian Party. You could, I definitely have libertarian type leanings. A lot of people, when they think of libertarian, they think of chaos and anarchy, which just says that they don't understand what libertarian type leanings are. But if I was going to vote for someone now, it'd probably be the libertarian candidate. But yeah, feel free to write me in, and who knows, you might see my name on a ballot some day somewhere out there.
Yeah, and the things that you share are very balanced, and I can tell that you're using a great analysis of what you've been disseminating for information sources, and I just think that it's very an eye opener for people that are listening to this either on recording or live. And they're going to be able to say, well, how do we get Dr. Gala more exposure? How can we get your message to a larger audience? Because we're doing a decent job with what we do with our funding and how we promote our show and how we produce. But I really believe your voice needs to be heard on a massive scale. I really believe that the world deserves your message right now. My coach would tell me now more than ever. And I think that when we talk about this discussion, this topic that you're sharing with us, it's very timely. And, for us to be able to host you on the Chiro Hustle podcast and to talk to you and to have this conversation, it wasn't the angle I was looking for during this conversation, but it's what's being presented. And I think that you can't stymie with the presence, and you can't, segue out of what is truth. And I think that that's really something that makes our show so unique, is we do keep free speech alive and well in the chiropractic profession. We do talk subluxation, we do talk innate intelligence, but we also talk freedom, and we talk personal responsibility, and we talk chiropractic truth. And when we distill this down and we disseminate it to the masses, people deserve to hear what you have to say. So my challenge for you, Mr. Ironman and Mr. Pilot and Mr. Fry car driver, is to get your voice out to a larger audience. And don't think about how to swim, think about who needs it. And I really believe in your narrative. And I mean, this is coming from guys that have done over 800 productions in 3 years. Your voice and your message right now is so timely. And people are looking for good resources. And, there's no better opportunity to get your message out to more people than to keep getting on more shows like this. So when we're done, I'm going to make a comment to all of my podcast arena and say, hey, get this guy onto your show and let him talk about some things that are necessary for knowledge base for the common person. And I think that every mom and pop shop right now, they need this message. I think that every mom that's thinking about homeschooling, they need this message. I think that everybody that's thinking that there's going to be some boogeyman virus that kills them and their family off, they need this message. Everybody that's afraid and they're becoming mask holes and they're shaming people in public, like, they need to hear this message. They need to hear the other side of the story, that their television, which I call the box God, is not their leader. The leader is the best doctor in the world, the one inside of them. And that if they cleaned up the junk that they're feeding it through their eyes, their ears, their mouth, and all their orifices, they'd become a better version of themselves. And they could become a better, they could take the information that they're getting through the sources that they're getting it from, and they could say, you know what? I want to be healthy. I don't want to be drugged. And the only solution that they're giving to people right now is drug and fear. And if you drug and fear people, you ruin society. And I think that what we're talking about is how to repair society. Yeah. And that's what I think is a responsible conversation that we're having today, is how can we repair what's happening and the disinformation that's being disseminated right now.
Well, I think that's an excellent point, and I appreciate a lot of that, and I certainly would be open, and I'd love to talk with people that have a pursuit of intellectual honesty and aren't afraid to talk about tough topics, especially in long form, because things like Twitter and Facebook, in the written form is probably the worst it's probably the worst form of communication that's been bestowed upon humankind in terms of creating cohesion and connectiveness, as opposed to further divide into groups and tribalism. But I think one of the things you said, I think you hit it on the head, and that is, it's information doesn't equal implementation. And this is one of the things that I say in my lectures, and I've probably given, I don't know how many hundreds of lectures now to the general public on health and providers as well, but obviously more to the general public. But it's that, if you were to write a book on how to drive a car and give a set of keys in that book to a 15-year-old and say, here you go, I mean, it'd be a complete mess. I mean, that's actually illegal. It's illegal to do that. It's illegal to give a 15-year-old a book and a set of keys and say, here, go out on the roads and teach yourself. So, but how many hours does a doctor spend with an individual patient teaching them how to drive their most valuable car, in terms of their body and their health? And it's, I think of how many hours a parent spends with a 15-year-old to teach them just how to drive a car safely. Well, how many hours does a provider spend with a patient each year to teach them how to really be healthy and really how to do things right? I mean, you're talking 15 minutes at most, maybe 15 to 30 minutes 4 times a year, and that's for somebody that's like sick and they're going in often. That's not even preventative stuff. So they're going in maybe 15 to 30 minutes, a year. And how much of that time is actually just spent with the doctor saying, well, your labs look better or your labs look worse. Come back in 3 months. Here's your meds.
You couldn't pay me to go to a traditional doctor.
Right.
I wouldn't step foot in a facility that does that type of doctoring.
Right.
I'd be like, nah, man, I'm good. I'm just going to go here hiking and eating organic food.
Well, that's the problem, though, is you have the vast majority of the population, doing what the masses are doing. And that's the collective consciousness, is they've been told and they believe that you go to the doctor every 6 months, they give medications, and they believe that that's what health is. And so right now there's this huge disconnect between the mainstream concept and what people should be doing if their goal is to really pursue health. And that's where it comes down to, the personal accountability and responsibility is you somehow have to get into the minds of the people, look at what the masses are doing and do the opposite, because most people are wrong about most things most of the time. And that's including me on topics that I don't know much about. I mean, I'm not an astronaut, so I don't know what it's like to be an astronaut. But if you put up a multiple choice of what probably the average person thinks about astronauts, I would probably get most things wrong, just like everyone else. But it's being able to, it's like the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? It's like at first people think they know a lot about something, and then they realize that they don't know that much, and then over time they become an expert, and then they realize that they start to know more. And the true sign, so supposedly one of the true signs of someone that's very wise or knowledgeable or deep in a subject matter or a topic is somebody that's usually regarded as being at the top of their field. And then when they turn around and say, yeah, and I don't even really know that much.
You made it to Chiro Hustle. Sit back and learn from the greatest influencers in the profession. This week's episode is brought to you by Imaging Services, ChiroThin, Chiro Moguls, Mahalo Wellness, Local Gold, Chiro Health USA, The Goodman Factor, Chiropractic Rocks, Winner's Edge, Accident Records, Chiro Tax Pro, and Digital Hustle. Let's hustle.
That's because they know how deep it actually is, because they've gone through that and they're way up there by our estimations on a topic or subject. And even when they're there, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm just now kind of seeing what the heck is out here. And hey guys, even I'm really far away from where we could and should be. And so the problem is, how do you get those people to be in the position of inspiring public policy? And how do you encourage the average person to listen to those kind of people? Well, and I think that's why you see the emergence, just like you said, of podcasts and this long form content, is people are tired of the canned news, and they're tired of the canned, special interest. And that's why Joe Rogan, I think, has more viewership per episode than I think the Game of Thrones finale did. So because people want to see and hear the real, genuine live content of people that are masters in their field that he's interviewing, for instance. So how do we get those people that are experts in the natural space? Because you can get experts in vaccines or you can get experts in the natural space. How do you get people to realize that of those two choices, they can listen to either one? It's not an either or. And the one of natural is likely going to have a much better outcomes for you, both short and long term, in areas that you don't even realize. But we have to shift that consciousness.
The point is that we're taking information from the wrong sources and we're believing that to be truth. And
absolutely,
I would have to be bleeding or dying to go to the hospital that we represent in our nation, because I know we do a really great job, and you probably have said this in your lectures, at emergency medical care, but when it comes to our health grade scores, we are failing miserably.
100%. Here's the problem. If you say, just take masks, for instance. If you say, hey, I think it should be up to the individual, if they want to wear masks or not. And people say, well, what? Don't you think masks help? And the thing is this. The thing is to say that I think most people would agree with the idea that if properly used, masks likely reduce the transmission of COVID in certain circumstances. However, the problem is in the same breath, you also have to say that is minuscule compared to the other things we can be investing our time and energy in that would far surpass any perceived or actual benefit from wearing masks. And it's such a distraction. But the problem is if you give people that one little piece and say, yes, it's possible that masks likely work in the right situation, and you put all these qualifiers around it to say, yeah, if they probably do help in certain circumstances for some people, but that's not even where we should be focusing. It's like people are arguing over how to arrange the furniture on the Titanic. It's like yes, there is probably a good place for that table and chairs, and I will grant you that, but that's not even close to what we should be focusing on. But people will die on the sword about where that patio umbrella needs to be angled. And like, how do you even have that conversation with people? And that is the crux of it, is how do you get people to the table? And this is the thing, how do you get people to the table of long form content to have a genuine discussion? And I think that's what we need, is more people like you doing this and creating that opportunity for people to actually have a discussion and take a step back and reflect on their own identity politics and their own tribalism, because we all have it, myself included, and try to reflect a little bit better on what we've grabbed onto and not realized it.
Well, we're definitely connecting the dots for a reality that some people will listen to, and they'll open some eyes. I urge everybody out there, I never really do this during our live shows, is to like share this and comment on this and, put this into your groups about natural health, and any chiropractor out there listening that does listen to this, please share this episode. I think that there's a lot of content that we're sharing in this. It's very timely, and it's not about always hitting a home run with our knowledge. It's about, having a high average. And I think that that's what we kind of lose in sensationalism of the media, is people believe that one story and that one line rather than the average of life. And most people don't want to be sick, and they don't want to be suffering, and they don't want their family and loved ones to be sick. And that's why the mask thing becomes such a personal thing for people, is because they're being told stuff by the wrong sources, and then they're making that their truth. And I mean, just going to the grocery store or going to a restaurant, for instance, and saying you have to enter the place with the thing on, and then you can go sit to your table. And then when you sit to your table, you don't have to have the thing on. Like, the lunacy around it and the incongruency around it. And you can be on an airplane and you have to enter the airplane, but once you get your drink and your snacks, you don't have to have it on while you're having your drink and your snacks.
And the best one is that there's no there's no uniform code in terms of what kind of mask people have to wear. I saw employees at this one business wearing masks that were the equivalent to like lingerie lace. Like you could see their entire mouth through these like holes. It would probably let fish through. Like it wouldn't even be a good net for fish. And you could see their entire mouth. And it's completely ridiculous, the types of things that people even wear, and the government says, yeah, that's acceptable.
But please, let's not get it to a point where we have a uniform style that we all have to wear.
But yes, but here's the thing: is people debating over that? To me, it's real simple. If a business requires a mask, great. If you want to go to that business, great. If a business doesn't want to require masks, great. If you don't want to go to that business that doesn't require masks, great. Easy, done, solved. I mean, if you don't like strip clubs, you don't have to go to strip clubs. I mean, no one's forcing you in there. I mean, are you gonna require that that women in strip clubs wear masks over things that you don't want to see because it's infiltrating? Because ideas spread much more viral than infectious diseases, and ideas are much more powerful than some disease. So what about the idea of strip clubs? I mean, that's spreading a certain ideology and certain views. How come they're not required to mask certain things? Well, people just don't go in there, and it doesn't bother them, and those ideas don't infiltrate their mind. So you can draw all kinds of parallels and examples, but it really comes down to, one of the arguments is, what's the role of government versus individual freedom and responsibility and individuals working together on it. And I think where that comes into, again, in chiropractic, it's how do we inspire and motivate people that they will be so much freer if they recognize personal responsibility and personal accountability and the lumps and bumps that come with that. Learning how to ride a bike, no one can ride your bike for you, and no one can skin your knees for you. And that's part of learning how to ride a bike. But once you learn how to ride a bike when you're a kid, think of all the freedom that gets the average kid when they now have their new set of wheels. I mean, that the world opens up, when you get a bike as a kid. And the same thing is true for nearly everything in life when people are willing to skin their knees a bit and come out the other side with the courage and the confidence and the new capabilities that they get from going through that exercise. And I think we do a disservice by not inspiring people, by politicians and us, by not inspiring people to think at that higher level. And I think on that note, the higher level that you can get people to think and to process conceptually, the deeper the reward and the deeper the outcomes and the deeper problems get solved on a much higher of magnitude than people that come to me and say, okay, Dr. Gala, so I know you can reverse Parkinson's. That's great. Okay, so tell me what I need to eat and drink. It's like, I will, but before that, we need to make sure you have the right mindset. And I'll spend probably an hour on mindset just before I even drop in the to-dos, because having the right mindset is so crucial for creating that framework of how you walk the life, how you evaluate things, how you sift through information, how you set up your core values, like Luke, like you said, like your mantras, your foundation. So then when things come to you, you can question that on a deeper level and say, okay, well, if this is true, then that must be, you can process through, and you can be okay changing what some of your core beliefs are as it makes sense. And you're open to that as opposed to just doubling down.
I'm going to pass it to Luke here in one moment, but I wanted to touch on something that's kind of a fun story in the middle of the serious conversation that we're having about like natural freedom and natural health. I learned how to ride my bike and swim by my brother, Dennis, who's 10 years older than me. And the first thing he did is put me on a bike and didn't teach me how to use brakes. And what did I do? I went and wrecked into a parked car and flipped over the handlebars. So that's how I learned how to ride a bike. So it did produce some freedom down the line, but I had to skin myself up a bit to learn. Right. And then how did I learn to swim? My brother Dennis threw me in the deep end of a pool, and that's how I learned how to swim. I either died or I learned how to swim. So right. There we have it. So back to the swimming analogy of not knowing how to swim during an Ironman. I was 5 and didn't know how to swim in a pool, and my brother taught me how to swim by throwing me in the deep end. He taught me how to ride a bike by pushing me and having me wreck into a parked car. So there you have it.
So there probably was some better, safer ways to learn, but what you learned nonetheless. And I think, that's all part of it, right?
And that's what we have to teach ourselves when it comes to learning things about living in this new world and living in our current times is, yeah, sometimes you're going to flip over the damn handlebars. Sometimes you're going to have to teach yourself how to swim in the deep end. But that's what we're at right now.
Yeah.
And there's not a mask that's going to save you, and there's not a vaccine that's going to save you from this boogeyman virus.
Well, and that's the thing is people will say, well, yeah, but Dr. Gala or Thaddeus, yeah, but you know what, like ventilators, they save lives, hospitals. Yes, but let's hold on a second. First off, you can't put all that together. I mean, I think there was a study that came out, I think it was in the New England Journal of Medicine, that showed that once people get to the point of where they need a ventilator, if you have 100 people go on a ventilator, only one of them will actually live. So once someone gets on a ventilator, there's an argument that only 1% will live. So if you were really into taking association studies and looking and pretending that was a causation, you would say that ventilators kill 99% of people. And you would actually say that ventilators actually kill people. Only 1% of people live when they actually have to experience a ventilator. But we've somehow twisted this and say, well, we need new ventilators. We need ventilators, and we don't have enough hospitals. We don't have enough ventilators. But the problem is it's not ventilators. That's way too late to the game. That's completely missing the point. But that's the problem is people aren't willing to really hear that or look at that. They say, well, we can't flood the hospitals, and I get that, and that makes sense. But people will respond appropriately when they realize what the true numbers are, what the threats are, if it really is as it is. So if you have a 1% survival rate once you're on a ventilator, you could almost make the argument saying that hospitals are killing people if you were to draw the same comparison that association equaled causation. But I'm not. But if you were just to look at them on the surface, if you said, hey, we're implementing this treatment and it has a 1% survival rate, you could almost argue and say, well, I think that actually isn't a treatment. I think that's actually just killing people. But obviously, when we look in deeper, I would like to think that that's not the case. But who knows? Maybe it is.
Two things that go to the chiropractic storyline. People are coming, as you call them, comorbidities. And what we know that in is the chiropractic, we know that as limitations of matter and lack of adaptation. So when we have the limitation of adaptation and limitations of matter, that's when people die.
Yeah.
And you can't adjust, somebody's spine that comes in with stage 4 osteoporosis. They've neglected themselves for so long, and then what happens? They die. And
and that's the thing is, I believe that us as chiropractors and natural healers and politicians out there, I believe the mantra should be saying, hey, you guys, how do we all inspire each other to make it really hard to die? Like, what do we all need to do to make it really hard for us to die? Like, let's make it hard for yourself to be killed. What do you need to do to make it hard for yourself to be killed? And let's all work towards helping each other do that. And the best way to do that is, here's the thing, right? You look at Italy and people say, yeah, well, it ravaged Italy. Look how bad this coronavirus is. Well, I've heard a lot of other experts say, and I believe it was the Department of Defense that came out with a study that showed that people that have the flu vaccine, that there's a supposed link and this is from the Department of Defense, it's on PubMed, you can find it, that found that people that had the flu vaccine, there was some kind of interference, they believe, with immunity that led to an increased susceptibility of coronavirus. So now let's just take a step back for a second and just think of like an hypothesis that's worth exploring. So in Italy, you have a disproportionately high, my understanding is you have a disproportionately high number of older people. Who's more likely to get the seasonal flu vaccine, younger people or older people? Well, people typically that are older are pursuing the flu vaccine. So you could almost make the argument and say that in Italy, that if they had a higher disproportionate number of older people, they had a higher number of people that took the flu, you could almost say that they set themselves up as a ticking time bomb because they made themselves really easy to kill. Because they were relying on outside sources for their immunity, and surrounding themselves in a tinderbox. It's like when people were released from the hospitals and they were put back into nursing homes. It's like, Like, so you're taking someone that's sick and you're putting them in an already vulnerable population. Like, how is that going to work out well? You know, it's like let's go into the HIV ward and not wash our hands with a bunch of like just common infections. Like that does like you can't do that. Like, this is a vulnerable population. So the argument again is how, we need to be inspiring people to live their fullest life, to be being proactive, make it very hard to die, putting all those things in their favor to make them as resilient as possible, and not focus on the furniture on the deck of the Titanic, but focus on not only where they're going, but being smart about it so they don't not only hit the iceberg, but if they do hit the iceberg, they're taking the right steps afterwards to rectify it.
I love you. I mean, if we didn't like this mic, I've said it a couple of times, I'd drop it.
So, but that's it, right? And how do you do that without alienating the other side? And I hate to say the other side because I don't want to think of it as sides, but because it's, and that's the tricky part is how do you get people to the table that vehemently disagree with you or that you disagree with, and how many people are you really willing to sit and listen to and say your piece, and how many people are you really willing to listen to and hear their piece? And I think it was maybe Tim Ferriss quoting someone else that said, you can judge the success of someone in life typically by two things. One is the number of difficult conversations they've been willing to have, and number two, the number of difficult decisions they've been willing to make. And I think that's so true. The more that we are willing to have the difficult conversations, that's it's like I think it was Jordan Peterson that said, freedom of speech. It's the reason that we have freedom of speech is so you can say things and risk being offensive. But that's why it's there, is because if you aren't offensive, then you're not really thinking. You're just talking about the weather. It's there to not intentionally to set out to offend somebody, but if you say anything of value, it's going to offend somebody. Otherwise, it's not of value because it's not revolutionary. It's not forward thinking. It's not changing the status quo. Because as soon as you come up with an idea or a thought that people are going to disagree with, that's where the rub is. Now, how do you sit in that and still be willing to have that conversation? Just like you said, like, hey, let's talk about, guns, abortion, religion, and politics. Sure. And how many people are willing to have that without, the steam coming out their ears and they storm out? And so we have to create that space that makes it an available space where people can and they're willing to have the conversation, whether they're right or wrong, and maybe they change or don't change their mind at all. But when they leave, they at least heard something different. And so I think, the natural healthcare space, it's recognizing that people, when they're coming in, they're being showered and they're being cultivated in this nest of health. But as soon as they step outside the doors, it's a floodgate of crap that's coming at them. So however well we prepare them mentally or physically for as soon as they step out and pay the bill and step out the front door, we have to get them like ready for the world, right? It's just like a parent getting their kid ready for the world. We have to arm them with it, and we have to inspire them. And when they come back and they have these, ideas that we know maybe aren't serving them, or they've slipped off, they fell off the wagon, or they're saying, yeah, you know what, I've been thinking about getting this vaccine. How do we approach them and say, instead of saying, God, you're an idiot, what are you thinking about? Saying, I completely get that. The vast majority of people think that, and I don't blame you at all. Here's some of the things that you might want to consider, and maybe here's a success case, or here's some other things. So how do we gently extend that olive branch as opposed to saying, you suck, you're dumb, and you're horrible? Because that's not changing people's minds. It's like Trump supporters that say, God, Biden's an idiot, and it's Biden supporters that say Trump's an idiot. Like, how is that ever going to cause people to step across the aisle? So to me, it's the same thing as how it is. One of us has to be willing to lay down our sword.
A while ago, we briefly touched on the way that things could or should be. And from your perspective, where do you see chiropractic going in the next 20 years?
I think, I don't think any business now is going to be the same then, right? Look at primary care. They get the luxury, primary care gets the luxury of telemedicine and doing that. And with chiropractic, yeah, I mean, I don't know how many states are allowing telemedicine. You certainly can do that. And if you reposition yourself, but right now, I mean, that's the thing, right? You know, if you don't change your business practices and you just run your business exactly the same for the next 20 years, you're going to be obsolete, because there's going to be new technology, there's going to be new things out there, and things are going to change. So I think number one is you have to be adaptable. So we as chiropractors and healthcare providers, we have to be adaptable. We can't alienate ourselves. We can't alienate our patients. We have to be inclusive, not exclusive. We have to be willing to have the tough conversations. We have to be willing to stand up. We have to be willing to send a message that can reach the masses. And we have to be careful in terms of how we craft that. Because if we come across, you know, as energy healers or airy fairy or, you know, waving feathers around, you know, as much as that may work for some people, that's not going to win people over. And if anything, it's just going to cause a further divide. So we have to be smart in our messaging. We have to, without blunting our true belief and value, but we have to be able to just be really smart in terms of how we craft that message and being true to that and being consistent with it, and then utilizing all of the technologies that are out there so we can be competitive. And, you know, and that's, you know, it's like the phrase, the best marketer always wins. So we have to be better at marketing, and marketing really is storytelling. It's not, hey, you know, $60 for an adjustment special. You know, that's advertising. It's marketing. It's saying, it's what we're talking about. It's saying, hey, if you like this mindset, you know, if you want to have a life like this patient over here, if you want to win, if you're tired of, you know, this and this in your life, if you think maybe there's something different, you know, hey, maybe you want to listen, you know, to the Chiro Hustle podcast, or maybe you want to listen to this, or whatever the case may be. So we welcome people in with information and education, because if you do that and you have good content, you have a good message, once people get it, they won't leave. They won't leave. And that's the thing with, I think, politicians. The politicians that have deep foundational core messages actually have deep followers, as opposed to just being the flavor of the month. And I think it's really easy to be the flavor of the month, but when things get hard and things get tough, it's the people that have a deep core foundation that maintain their position and their followers, because they know, even though they're not 100% of the time, they're not 100% right 100% of the time, they know that they have a truism that runs a much deeper, that they can trust, and they recognize that even in their fallibility, that they're still trying to be true to their deeper core philosophy, even though they may still skin their knees in the process. Like I said, I'm not trying to pretend that individual sovereignty or liberty is perfect, but I believe it's much, much better than group identity politics or special interests.
You know, when you have this like depth of knowledge and you share with us, it's not us against them. It's very pure and true. And I believe that it's all of us together. And some of the slogans that are being popularized right now is "we're all in this together" type stuff. It is very true. We all are in this together, but there has to be choice. And that's the real thing about being a free American citizen, is choice. And you touched on it earlier in our conversation about mandate, the idea of mandate. And that's not American. And it's not freedom.
Right.
And it's totalitarianism. And it's government overreach. And it's a part of it's un-American, number one, to tell people that they have to do something a certain way without choice. Right. And I think that when you talk about laying your sword down, I think all of us do right now. We all need to lie the weapon down and use the two things instead of the one thing. And I think when we start listening to each other more, the narrative changes. And I do think that the chiropractic profession is an industry transformer when it comes to the future of how people take care of themselves with self-responsibility. And I do see the Edison quote being very, 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 very true right now, is the doctor of the future will enter his patients in the care of the human frame and won't be in pharmacology or in medicine, but it will be in the design of the body. And I really believe that it's not the doctor of the future anymore, it's the doctor of the present. And when Thomas Edison framed that quote, he was talking about chiropractic. And that's why chiropractic ascribed to that messaging so heavy over the years. And, and then we can talk about the other sign is that chiropractic gives you years to your life and life to your years, like it did for your mother. And I think that when we talk full circle and we turn the conversation into an actual motivator, and like you say, a lot of times it's to inspire people. I don't know if you've ever had any training with John DeMartini, but it sounds like it from listening to how you frame some of the things that you say. But when you talk about becoming a communicator and having a conversation and being able to take what's being produced and distill that down and then use those as reference points, that's very important, because a lot of people just talk because it's their opinion. And opinions matter when you're trying to defend yourself from something. But when you have an opinion that is stand up next to what people are actually producing in the marketplace, that's when you actually have something that you can say, okay, well, we might get bumped up a little bit along this journey, but hey, at least we have some resources we can share. And I think that that's the thing about getting into a fight, is the fighter that prepares most, and it's hard to kill, and that it's hard for them to die. They're the ones that live. Yeah. And that's kind of what we're at right now in the human and species, is that we all have to be hard to kill, and we all have to be hard to take advantage of. We all have to be hard to have discernment of messaging. And that's really where we come to the other thing, is survival of the fittest. And it's not survival of the fittest so much more in the body, it's survival of the fittest to the last frontier, which is the mind. And when we start talking these big high-end conversations about, what can we do to prepare the body to be stronger? Well, that's what the narrative needs to be to mainstream, is we need to figure out how can we intertwine the chiropractic messaging with the science, philosophy, and art, and also the give, love, serve. And I think that that's what will make chiropractic be that industry transformer of the future of healthcare. And whatever it is it's pharmacology is going to lose its course, because it's going to prove to be ineffective. And the people that are funding it, the money that they're giving, the mass majority of people say, I don't want that anymore. I don't want your money. I don't want your funding. And you're taking money from the wrong people. And I think that that's where people's eyes are going to open up to in the future, because what's happening right now is a huge revelation for people to start to see that there is a lot of bad stuff in the dark corners that no one's talking about. And when they start shining their lights in there, and they're like, ooh, what's over there? Ooh, I don't want to talk about that. Oh my gosh, right. That's there too. And eventually people are going to start finding what they don't want to see, because it's being produced for them. And I think that that's really why chiropractic is positioned the way that it is, and why you said long form journalistic conversations like we're having today are going to be the new frontier for how people get information and how they build their relationships with educators and doctors. And I know that we're on the edge of our time with you today, but I do know that there's a lot of value in what we discussed today. And I know that we do need to get some web resources from you if people want to learn more about you, or if they want to stay in touch with you, or anything that you're producing. Where can we send people to if they want more information on you?
They can follow me on Facebook. My personal page is kind of my public page, so they can follow me there. Or they can go to drthadgala.com for health stuff, and they can go to trustedskysolutions.com for tax elimination. So or the best thing is probably to follow me on my personal Facebook and just follow me there, or those other places.
Yeah, and I know that there's a lot of stuff that we left without asking you on this interview, but I think we touched on the pertinent stuff that's of current knowledge. And I just want to thank you so much for being our guest today. And,
thank you both, Jim and Luke. It's been wonderful. It's been great. And if we want to do a part 2, let me know.
I think we're primed for part 2, so we'll reach out to you. But we want to thank you once again for being our guest, and we want you to have an amazing rest of your night. And man, just stay in touch with us, okay?
Thank you, and likewise, I appreciate it.
All right.
Awesome. Well, it was nice meeting you, and we'll talk to you next time.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for listening to Chiro Hustle. Don't forget to subscribe and check back next week to continue hustling.